honor and our pleasure today to invite and have as our celebrity, I always want to say lean celebrity guest. It's our 7 Habits celebrity guest, Mark Bieraugel, who is our business librarian. And Mark, in order to do justice to your background, can you tell a little about what your current position is, what it does, and then I'm going to ask you to say, well, how'd you get there? What
Okay.
was your career route?
Well, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you because this is stuff I don't normally talk about because it's not related to my job per se, but it's definitely related to my job. So I'm a librarian and I'm your librarian if you're in the College of Business. And I've been at Cal Poly for 549 weeks. And I'm also I don't know, you might call it a side hustle, but I also do research consulting for the small business development downtown. So startups, firms that are starting up, firms in various situations need information. And so I do that work on the nights and weekends. And so I also do, I work with a ton of startups and I can't tell you anything about them, but it's fascinating work. And I help them to make decisions with information, help them find information. I find information for them, make it actionable, package it up and get it to them. So my day job is to come to classes like this and talk about information and connect students with the information they need, various databases. I do individual research consultations. I also buy all the materials for the College of Business within our library. And I also help run the library in different ways. So I'm a faculty member, so I have to publish as well. So, and going backwards in my career, I was thinking about this today because thankfully your professor gave me the questions before I got here. So I've been up since 4:30, so I'm an early bird. So this is actually past my bedtime, so I'll be a little squirrely. So I'm going to try to make sense. So when I was thinking about my career, I was thinking about the vast amount of career that I had before I got here. And so about, if you think about like a cicada and they go underground and they're underground for like 12 years and they're like nibbling on roots and then they come out. So every 10 or 12 years, I've had different careers. So that doesn't quite map, but so the first 10 years I got out of college and I had a drama degree, but I wasn't dramatic enough, right? So I wasn't an actor enough. So I stayed with the part-time job that I had. It was in retail sales and I was selling cosmetics and fragrances. So I did that virtually for about 10 years. I worked at what now is Macy's and it used to be Robinson's in California. And then I also worked at Neiman Marcus in Beverly Hills. So I did see some stars and celebrities. I guess my most famous star in a way is Julia Roberts, who I helped. She was dating Kiefer Sutherland at the time. So she bought a fragrance from me. So I did that. And then I moved to Eastern Washington with my ex-husband and I went crazy and I decided I had to leave Eastern Washington and I moved to Japan, literally. Like I moved to Japan and I became an English teacher in a Japanese language school and did that for about a year. It was always my dream. I didn't go crazy. I just needed to do something else. So I didn't want to be in Eastern Washington. And so I went to Japan and I taught English and it was really great. And I learned a lot and I looked out of my apartment and I could see Mount Fuji and it was really fabulous. I lived about a 40-minute train ride outside of Tokyo. I came back and I got back into retail and I worked in a jewelry store. I worked in fine jewelry for a few years. And then they wanted to put me in a managerial job and my stomach hurt so bad and I couldn't do it. And so I had this thing, like I would literally go to libraries on my days off and I would be there like all day. And I would go to academic libraries. I was living in Eastern Washington and I would get this crazy feeling like I needed to be there. And finally I realized, well, why don't you be there? Right? I had this like epiphany, right? And so I studied for the exam and I took the GRE and I got into University of Washington. And then I didn't want to work in a library because I didn't want to work in a public library because it felt too much like social work, but I wanted to work for Disney and work in their Imagineering area. So Imagineering is where they use the design build for all their parks and even their boats now. And so I went in with the idea that I want to do this crazy, interesting stuff, but not for a public library or an academic library, but for a business. I worked at 3 different startups. I got out of school and I worked at Microsoft as a contractor. I got out of school and one of my colleagues said, why don't you come and work at the startup? I worked there 90 days, basically 3 months. They grew really big and they fired 90% of their employees. The next startup I worked for lasted 7 months and then went completely under. After that, I decided that I was going to work for a firm that might be around a little bit longer. So I worked for a public relations firm. I was doing overnight work. I would work a 10 to 5 shift. So 10 at night to 5 in the morning doing research. I did that, and then I worked for an accounting firm, Moss Adams. It's a large regional accounting firm. And then they downsized me. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I got into, a friend of mine said, could you please come and be an academic librarian at Tacoma Community College? So I did that, and I was like, dang, I love teaching. And I felt like it was like, I did this research stuff for businesses for 10 years, and it just felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. So I pivoted, like if you were an entrepreneur, I would say, well, I shifted my business model into the academic world. And so I did retail for 10 years. I did business librarianship, but for business. And then I shifted to academia, and here I am today. So if you ask me what I like most, it's like, well, I don't know what I like most, but I like this, actually, I like this most because I'm doing a lot of great stuff and it's really fun. And I'm using all the stuff I learned when I worked at startups, and also even my dramatic arts background.
So Mark, that's really kind of cool. I guess, at some point, and I think it was like 3 years ago or something, we kind of hooked up and, getting into sort of the 7 Habits stuff. You came to one of the public workshops,
right,
where we sort of learned about this stuff. And, knowing something about, you're kind of like one of my 7 Habits, go-to people now, looking back at that career, begin with the end in mind. I choose, like what do you, first thing first, like what, like, what was retrospectively, can you sort of map that in, or?
Yeah, I think that I always try to focus on what's important, right? And so I think if you think about put first things first, that like is kind of the through line. Like I always try to concentrate on, like, I need to get something to the CEO of my startup. That's more important than 7 of these other things that are coming in, right? Or if I'm doing, I actually did some research for Bill Gates' office when I worked at Microsoft. That was like the prime, like you got to do that stuff first. So I think prioritizing, because we're really distracted, right? And we're even more distracted now because you have your phone, you've got, you're trying to do all these things. There's all this incoming noise. So I think, if I had it, I think that would probably be the through line there.
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since we've sort of talked, and I think you were maybe like one of my celebrity guests. I don't know if we were together last summer, but it might even have been, earlier than that, last year. But I think we started talking about like the big rocks idea, right? So that's like,
have they done that? Have they done that one?
Yeah. So
okay.
So we're up to habit 5.
Yeah, and sorry, I have my notes, everyone, because I tend to go off script. So I didn't write that whole crazy, like, my life of work, because I think part of the reason I go over all those details, and thank you for calling that out, Eric, is that, this wasn't a life of planning. So, I have a brother and he's a nuclear engineer, and he had his life planned out literally for like 30 years, and he did it, right? From college freshman to retirement. He's already retired. He's 5 years younger than me. And so I don't have that thing. And it was really hard for me for a long time to not have this grand plan, but somehow I'm here and I'm happy, right?
Right.
And so I think what my boss, the associate dean, actually gave me a cup full of aquarium gravel. And And then I actually had all these other rocks that I then stuck in, because you could actually stick them in the gravel once the gravel's in there, right? You don't even have to put the rocks in first and pour the gravel. And so to me, that's how I've survived academia. So it was a huge shift for me to go from business to working in an academic environment, having to publish in academic journals and doing all this academic stuff. And so my thing was, do the most important things first at the beginning of the week, put those big rocks on your calendar so that you block out the time.
Right.
And then all that little stuff, which takes 15, 20 minutes, an hour, you can sort of slot that in. And it's proven to really work for me over these last 549 weeks or so.
Yeah. So I want to encourage the students. So if you want to ask Mark a question, go ahead and either raise your hand or type into the chat, and we'll kind of get you on this little video recording. But Mark, so maybe you can talk a little bit about, how you were first exposed to the seven
right.
habits.
Yeah. Exposed is the right idea. So let's go back in time, everyone, to 1991 or so around. I had moved to Spokane, Washington, Eastern Washington, and I was like, I got to get out of here. And I saw a tiny newspaper ad that says, go to Japan and teach English. And I went to Japan, and while I was there, I actually read the 7 Habits book. And let me tell you, I was not really enchanted. There's a couple different things. So I'm a queer, non-binary critter, and previously a gay man. And at the time, I was like, this is a little too much religion and Mormonism for me in this book. Like, I just couldn't, I thought the ideas were solid, but the sort of stuffing and framework around it was kind of disenchanting to me, because I don't really like that. They don't really like, queer people and Mormons in general. I mean, I'm not saying all of Mormons do, but I mean, it just sort of tainted it a bit. However, I decided to, I have a boss, and she really likes 7 Habits. And I said, well, let me give it another chance, because, I'm a different critter now. It's years later. I've softened up. I'm a little less judgmental, I hope. And so I went, and I was like, oh, this really, I didn't feel that. I didn't feel like it was off-putting, and I felt like this is something that I really can use and go back to and start using in my career to really, I don't want to say I'm more productive. I'm a relatively nervous person. And so having systems within place helps me to feel better about what I'm doing and concentrating on. And so I think the 7 habits, that whatever habits you decide to choose, that work for you, can help mitigate some of that. At least it's helped mitigate some of my anxiety about, am I doing the right thing? Am I focusing on the right thing? It helps me to prioritize.
Right. Yeah, I think, that's a great insight. And it's just the fact that, there's some underlying principles there, and you take away some of the, the veneer and kind of go down to those core, ideas are pretty strong, right?
Yeah.
So Melly, do you want to?
It's actually Miley.
Miley. Okay, Miley. Sorry.
No worries. It's hard to pronounce. But I was just wondering, what are the kind of best systems you put in place to kind of plan out your week, and how do you do that? Because you said you like to get the big things done first and then kind of plan out your big rocks. But I was wondering kind of if you can go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So here's a crazy thing. I have a 980-page document describing all the work that I've done at Cal Poly. So I literally, now this is one thing. This is related, Miley. This is really related. When I got there, I was like, I got to remember everything, because I have to write when you're going up for tenure, and you might go up for review every year. You might have an employee review every year. I literally write everything down that I do, and I write my state of mind, and I write issues, and I go back to that in order to be able to reflect on it. So this 987-page document has really helped me to understand what I've done and where I've gone. It also helps me decide what works and what doesn't work. So I try stuff, it doesn't work. what I try to do is I use Outlook, and Outlook is a basic Microsoft program. Basically, it's a calendaring function, and I stick stuff in Outlook. And that helps me to look ahead and say, okay, you don't need to work on this right now. You can work on it on Tuesday, right? And so I just recently learned I also make to-do lists every day, but I write them out, right? And so I write out a to-do list, and then I have my calendar sort of over here on the side. And what that does for me is that, and I just learned this today, like yesterday, is that to make 2 to-do lists. One to-do list is your minimal list, things that you must get done. And you do that list, and then it's like when you're having kind of a bad day, right? And then the other list is your maximal list, right? Your maximal list, maximal list is that you write down like, this is going to be a glorious day. I'm going to put everything on there, even stuff that I'm probably do tomorrow or the next day, but it's going to go on there, right? And what happens is if you do the minimalist, you might end up doing 1 or 2 more things, and then you'll feel glorious. But if you have that maximal list and that's your only list, you're going to feel like I'm never finishing my list, right? And I just found this out the other day, and I was like, I've got to try this. It's a brand new thing. So really good question. So I use Outlook, I stick stuff in, I stick blocks of time in, and sometimes it'll be all day for one project. And that will keep me on focus, because if I don't have other assignments, I'm like, Mark, you got to do this all day. Otherwise you won't get any traction on it, right? Because if you're doing anything with your brain, it takes time to get into it, right? It takes time, and then once you get out of it, it takes time to get back in again, right?
So Miley,
that was really helpful, because
Oh.
I definitely think that's a good idea, making 2 lists, because sometimes it gets like I maybe sometimes mix my things that I don't actually need to get done. And
yeah, I mean, sometimes your lists are like so long. I try to keep small pieces of paper, because if I had a big piece of paper, it would be like full, right? So people have different methods, but the 2 lists is, I think it's going to save me, because it gets discouraging when you don't finish your list.
hey, Mark, so I'm also trying to, tune my practice and, identify my big rocks at the beginning of the week. But I struggle with the scheduling, because what I found is I'll say, okay, here's a big rock, and I'll put 2 hours on Thursday afternoon. And that big rock, 2 hours is a very optimistic time for that big rock, it turns out, right? That could be like a 5 or 6 hour rock that I'm, kind of got in that 2 hour slot. So what I've sort of evolved to is I'm big on identifying the rocks, but the ability for me to kind of put in dedicated time to schedule them, I'm more sort of shoehorning around things. What do you have a way? Like, are you, like, when you schedule that day, does it always get done in that day? Are you very good at estimating? Or
I think, and this goes back to Miley's comment, and I thank you for saying that. I think you can't. Part of this is many of my projects are longer term, and so it isn't like complete this project. So what I do is I tend to, like, the thing is due on the 15th, and then I block out time going backwards, and I put even more time than what I need. And what that means is that I have time scheduled for it. And if I get it done, I can remove that stuff from my calendar and feel glorious, right?
yeah.
And because then I've freed up time. But everything is deadline driven pretty much in your job or career or school, right? Pretty much there's always a deadline on things. Or if there's not a deadline, then it probably doesn't get done, unless it's something fun like sewing or, I don't know, embroidery or doing my nails. That stuff gets done. But the thing is that I tend to overschedule myself, but over scheduling in time, right? And so that I make sure that I give myself enough time, because like we said with those 2 lists, some days you're diamonds and some days you're coal, right? And so, and COVID can deal with there's more coal days than diamond days, really, because of this stuff. So,
well, I also have sort of discovered about myself is I have a hard time stringing diamond days together. You know, if I have a really good day yesterday, I know today is probably going to be a cold day, right? So,
Well, I mean, we have to live with ourselves, and that's a hard thing, and you got to work with what you have. And so I'm an early bird, so getting up at 4:30 is fine. But if you had a 7 to 10 class, I would be really hurting. I would have to have coffee, and then I would have to have another snack. I'd have to have my fourth breakfast or whatever it is. So, other questions?
yeah.
I usually go to bed at I usually get in bed by 6 and I'm asleep by 9,
Wow.
6 or 7, because it's a long, just staying out of trouble, so to speak. Because I tend to get very fussy at the night. So people can be fussy in the morning. I'm super fussy at night. So
Yeah.
it's better if I'm just looking at my tablet and quiet in the bed, not trying to do any projects.
Yeah. I find my productivity really drops down after 6 o'clock at night. So
I can do it. It's funny, if I have another meal or something, or if I have to go to class, if I'm teaching, going in and guest lecturing, I can do it. I just tend to be a little squirrely.
yeah. Well, I think it's about building enough sort of self-understanding about how you work and how you work best, right? Is an important thing. And I think so when we sort of talk about this idea of planning for a week and stuff, setting time aside, it sounds like by writing down things, you also, it sounds like there's a lot of reflection, right? And sort of trying to build sort of understanding about what works and doesn't work for you. That's big rock time, right? That's important.
I have to
we don't
really
often
think
have.
about it, because I have to make sure that that I don't get myself in a pinch in terms of having a deadline that I can't make, right? Because I don't work, some people work extremely well having a very short deadline, but I need a lot of lead time.
Yeah.
And so I know myself, and I'd rather have that in, we had to put in a special document, every 5 years I have to put in this document for my review. And I was one of the only ones ever to have it in early, of the whole history of the library. And so I'm not bragging, I'm just saying I wanted it early because I wanted it done, right? Once it's done, I can put it in the back seat and I can move forward, right? And so my thing is the big rock stuff, it helps me to put that stuff in the back seat.
And I think also, Mark, it's a reflection on your values and your character, right? So we're now sort of in the 7 habit stage where we're in the public victory part, right? And that that ability to deliver early on your commitments, that's part of the you have to do that work at sort of the personal sort of character level, the first things first thing, and then you could the public expression is getting your work done on time or early, or being a role model for other people in the library or whatever. So I think that's it's a 7 habits reflection, right?
I can't say that I'm completely dependable, because things, certain things, either they, sometimes you can't quite do it, right? Or some things are seemingly important to other people and seemingly very unimportant to me. And so part of it is to figure out what's important to the people that are giving you more money.
Yeah, well, that's
I mean, not always, but more money or love. I don't know, one of the two things, right? So
well, Mark, we're about out of time, I think, for this interview, because we got some other things we got to talk about. But I want to thank you for coming and sharing with us your sort of approaches and the learnings that you've gotten out of 7 habits. But before we go, what we'd like is maybe if you could share some parting words of advice for people just sort of starting out on their 7 habits journey. What do you think you can tell these 24 folks that are on the video listening at this point?
I never think about sharpening saw, but I probably do it. So part of this is to pick a couple of 7 habits and kind of try to work them into your life. right? Don't try to do all 7. Try to do just a couple and really get them working so that after 30 days, they're a habit. And so I would probably say, because you always want to do all of them. Like I'm a maximalist. I want all the stuff.
Yeah.
But give yourself a break, and try to just do 1 or 2, right? That really resonate with you and feel right, because not all of them really feel right.
Yeah. Or for
right
your,
at this point,
right. At this point in your life or whatever, pick the ones that will do the most for you.
pick the ones that excite you the most. That's what I always say. So
Yeah, there you go. All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll run into each other in person at at sometime soon.
I hope so too. I really wish all of you a lot of luck. This is a great program, and I don't want to talk about the cult of productivity too much, but it's not just about being productive. It's also feeling like you're doing the right thing, focusing on the right stuff. Kind of gives you a little more peace of mind. So it's not just about getting more stuff done, it's getting the right stuff done and feeling like you can just turn off your computer and be done for the day.
Yeah. Mark,
thank you, everyone. See you later.
And let's so we can say thank you to Mark. Let's go ahead and snap on your video if you're sort of able. Let's give Mark a nice little wave. So
Diego Gonzalez, Daniel, Harley, Scott, William.
All right. And Mark, you're in the library, so people can actually come and see you, right?
They could see me a couple days a week, but probably next quarter I'll be in the library more. Thank you, everyone.
Good deal. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.